that as a format to solve question 2. So any questions, raise your hand. All right?
这些对，
我没听懂啊，能今天
用这个来解。
追加完了，追加完了。
他受伤了。
他伤的挺重的。现在还记得我自己在家扭腰，买了一根拐杖，撑着去菜市场。Question 2, okay.跟异性在一起就是有对象，那45度他也有了。
别搞，我发现你有点坏。
我是不是很坏？
是，我只是。
赶紧学习，
哇，这个问题是要死。
他是用上周学的内容
做这些。但是。
Question 2. First download Excel sheets format in lecture week 2, and then you step 4 to question 2.
就是
Find the Excel.
Yeah.
Yes. Use the free cash flow valuation model formats.
这几个数复制回来。
对，你把这些数改，就这么靠这个模型做就行。真的不对。
So we just stay here, okay? Any question just come up.
你才是3年的，你改上面那个表正确一点吧。
是，就是3年，上面也是3年的。他给的也是3年的。
下面4年的，那是
哪有4年？
首先用这个嘛，他是首先用哪种办法来做呀？
4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的。4年的 这不他给3也是给了3年。
Full enterprise value 吗？它好像是用 free cash flow 来做吧，这个。
是 free cash flow， 就是 free cash flow。操，它是4，不是5。
但是它那个 negative 有什么用呀？
他没给。
这个呀，这个有什么用呀？
这个没用。
这个没用吗？
没用，它是算估值的话，不用考虑当期的值，你只考虑未来的。
这是方法1，你说的是哪一个？
方法1跟方法2一样。
为什么我们2个算的不一样？我们是有哪个数不一样？这个数，
因为它是1.132，它给 赔的是10%。
对，我这里忘了改了，不好意思。他妈的！我算了，还是这个错了吗？
这个你要改啊，
这我改了，第二个我改了，哦对，不好意思。14年改进。
有的个。
下面那个也要做对吧？
按股权价值啊，怎么知道股权价值？
你把那单那个净负债给减掉就好了，是吗？因为你是2022年的嘛。
现金流为净负债。
它是2022年的呀，年底呀，你把那个减掉就好了吧？你之前求的是公司的价值，你减掉那个不就好了吗？
真聪明。我总算下是多少？对，90对。
人家
759.759。对，不是直接减。
为啥不是直接减？
它是净现金流，现金流，你估的是整个企业的价值。
对呀、
不能直接减，
为啥不能直接减？
因为你估的是整个企业的价值，你减的是当年的现金流，那肯定有问题。
那你这份
你第一步算出来的是这个企业价值，他给你的是当年的现金流，你减出来是
谁是当年的现金流？
22年当年的现金流。
他给的是2年当年的现金流吗？
那个 following cash flow。
You forecast the following cash flow in millions for a firm with net debt. 人家是说这个公司有一个 net debt of759，它不是现金流呀。
那个翻译一下。
你这个英语要加强。
它是1.0。
东西写的。他反正就是中文的内容，他可能就比较好。
写的非常好，中文一点点讲。
我靠他妈的还有案例呀！操！
有的间隔太强，
出错了，闭嘴吧。
So now I have provided the solutions on the Excel sheet here. Try to compare the solutions to your answer.
错了，为啥我错了？
So can you raise your hand if you did it correctly? Anyone? No? Oh, yeah. One. Oh, two.
错了，完了。这不是错了吗？不好意思，要减去那个 tab。
你剪错了。
Okay, so let's look at it in more detail, right? So this is a very basic format for the free cash flow valuation model. Let's look at it row by row. The first row is the cash flow from operations. Just simply copy and paste because it's already provided in the question, right? It's easy for us because we don't need to calculate the cash flow from operations. It's already there. The second row is the capital expenditure. So here it is called cash investment in the question, but I think it's assuming there's no cash investment in short-term investment. So here cash investment is regarded as capital expenditure. So again, simply copy and paste. Copy and paste. Now, the free cash flow simply equals the free cash flow simply equals to CFO minus the capital expenditure. For example, you can see the function here, right? This free cash flow in 2023 simply equals to 1450 minus 1020, right? And then we continue to calculate the free cash flow for 2024, 2025. That is our third row. Up to now, we already have the number we need to put in the numerator. That's the free cash flow. Okay, good so far? Yeah? Now continue discount rate. Remember the free cash flow, it's an enterprise valuation model, or we call a firm valuation model. That's why we should use the WACC. But here I think it's just simply called required return. But when you see the word required return, then you need to think about it yourself. If it's the required return for equity, it's the cost of equity. If the required return for the firm, it's what? It's WACC. So here it's WACC. So for example, 2023, what is the discount rate? 1 plus the WACC, 10%. 10%, sorry, 10% the WACC, 10%. Okay, 1 plus the WACC. And then in 2024, 1 plus the WACC to the power of 2. Now, we don't need to do this for 2025 because we don't need to use the discount rate in 2025. Once you have the discount rate, then you can calculate the present value of the free cash flow. For example, how can we calculate 390.9? Simply use the free cash flow 430 divided by the discount rate, right? 1.1. Then we have the free cash flow for 2023. We do it the same for 2024. Now please pay attention. We are going to talk about this present value of continuing value. In the question, it tells us that after 2025, the free cash flow will grow at a constant rate of 4%. It means that in 2026, the free cash flow will be 518 multiplied 1.04, and then in 2027, it equals to 518 multiplied 1.04 to the power 2 going on forever, right? We talk about this. What is the continuing value? The continuing value is a value that captures all the future free cash flow after the forecast horizon. Okay, so here we use the 2025 as the first term in the growing perpetuity equation. We regard it as the first payment in the growing perpetuity equation. So the continuing value will simply equals to 518, the first payment in the growing perpetuity equation, divided by R minus G. R here is what? The WACC, 10%, minus G. G is what? 4%, which is the growth rate. So here we will have the continuing value equals to A633.3. This continuing value represents the value of the free cash flow in 2025, 2026, 2027, going on forever. However, you need to pay attention. This continuing value is the value at the beginning of 2025. It is not at the end of 2025. Although we use this 518, which is the free cash flow at the end of 2025, as the first payment in the growing perpetuity equation. After using the growing perpetuity equation, if you give you the continuing value at the beginning of 2025, not the end. What do we mean by the beginning of 2025? That is the end of 2024, right? The end of 2024. So that's why if you want to calculate the present value of the continuing value, which discount rate should we use? We should use the discount rate of 1.21. That is the discount rate at the end of 2024. Are you following? Okay? Because some students will simply calculate discount rate here, and then using this discount rate here in 2025 to calculate the present value of continuing value. No, we should use the discount rate in 2024. That is because, again, you are using the free cash flow at the end of 2025 as the first payment in the growing perpetuity equation. If you do that, you will have the continuing value at the end of 2024. Okay? That is the definition of the growing perpetuity equation. The first payment is the payment 1, right? And then the second payment is payment 2, and goes on forever. But what you are calculating is the value 0 at time 0. So that's why here, after you use the growing perpetuity equation, the continuing value, again, it is at the end of 2024. So use the discount rate 1.21 to discount it. You will have the present value of the continuing value. Okay? That is quite easy. We simply sum this present value of these three terms together, and that is the intrinsic value of our net operating assets. Intrinsic value of net operating assets, intrinsic value of the firm, intrinsic value of the enterprise, they are just the same meaning. So firm value, enterprise value, net operating assets value, just the same thing. Okay, just the same thing. As you can see, how do we arrive at this? We simply, now you can see it's very clear, right? We simply take the sum of the present value of all future cash flow. Here we have the cash flow in 2023, here we have the cash flow in 2024, and here we have the cash flow from 2025 and goes on forever, right? That's it. However, this one is the firm value. We are calculating the equity value. So firm value equals to equity value plus the net financial obligation, or we call the net debt. So after we have the intrinsic value of the firm, or we call the net operating assets, minus the net debt, if you arrive at the intrinsic equity value. Okay, as you can see, intrinsic equity value equals to the intrinsic value of net operating assets minus the net debt. That's it, 7140.4. Is it clear? Any questions here? It's very easy, free cash flow valuation model. A few students may find that it seems a little bit complicated, but this is the first tutorial. After this, beginning next week, you will find it very straightforward, okay? So some students, instead of using the 518 as the first term in the growing perpetuity equation, they use the 2026 as the first term in growing perpetuity equation. That's fine, but in such a case, you will have 4 terms, okay? 4 terms, and then it will arrive at the same value. Good. Now let's go to question 3. So spend around 10 minutes, look at the question, okay? And try to do the question 3A. It is a case about Coca-Cola. To value a company by using the financial statements, then we need to calculate the free cash flow by ourselves. Okay, so here are the equations. Okay, so this is the calculation of the cash flow from operations. So we can begin it from the net cash from operating activities, right? And we have the interest payments and interest receipts. Then we can calculate our net interest payments. We will need to deduct the tax, and then we have the net interest payments after tax. So we use the net cash from operating activities plus the net interest payment after tax. We arrive at the CFO, cash flow from operations. So it's not too difficult to make the arrangement. Then we need to calculate the investment cash flow. Investment cash flow. So we begin from the net cash from investing activities. We deduct the purchase of ST investment, short-term financial investment. And then we add back the sale of the short-term financial investment. We arrive at the investment. As you can see, the idea here is that we are looking at real capital expenditure on operating activities. Those purchase of short-term financial investment, sale of short-term investment, in fact, those are financial activities, right? They are not actually invest on the operating business. So that's why we need to remove that from calculating the real capital expenditure on operating assets. So after this, we have this cash investment in operating assets. Using a CFO minus the investment, we have the free cash flow. As you can see, if we are really looking at a case, it's a little bit more difficult than the previous one, right? We need to make some arrangement using different figures. But we finally arrive at the free cash flow. Now let's look at question 3b. Question 3b asks us to value Coca-Cola. But if you have read the case before, you will know that it's impossible to value Coca-Cola because the question is lacking one important information, and that is the growth rate. Remember, if we want to do a valuation of a company, first we need to have a forecast horizon. We already have that, right? 2028, 2029, 2010. We have our forecast free cash flow already, or if it's readily available. But then, after this horizon, we need to have an estimate future pattern of this free cash flow. So here, in this case, we first assume that the growth rate after 2010 is 4%. Why is 4%? Because here we use a conservative estimate, the GDP growth rate. It is a conservative estimate. But however, it also provides a reasonable estimate in some cases. Anyway, we first use 4% growth rate, and then we do the valuation of Coca-Cola. So for example here, for 2011, what is the free cash flow? It equals to 5942, which is the free cash flow in 2010, multiply 1.04. And then, using the 2011 as the first term in the growing perpetuity equation, we use the growing perpetuity equation to calculate the continuing value and then the present value of the continuing value, assuming that future free cash flow grow at 4%. We can also call this the long-term growth rate, right? The long-term growth rate. After this, we have the intrinsic value of the firm. We deduct the net debt. We finally arrive at the intrinsic equity value. That is 97878.5. Once we have the intrinsic value, we continue to calculate the intrinsic value per share. we have the intrinsic equity value 97878.5. We also know that the outstanding share is 2,318. This information is already given in the case. Okay. Using the intrinsic equity value divided by the outstanding shares, we have the price per share. The price per share is 42.225 of Coca-Cola. If we assume a growth rate the same as the GDP growth rate. Now, can anyone tell me what is the actually market price currently for Coca-Cola? It is given in the case. What's the price of Coca-Cola? In the case, what is it? 62. Good. It's here, right? Somewhere. Where is it? 62 here. Right?
好像是他说 GDP 增长率。
Coca-Cola current market price is 62.
哦，对，
That means
他的理
the
想。
market currently is estimating a growth rate higher than the GDP growth rate, right? However, if you believe that Coca-Cola is not such a great company, if you just grow like the GDP growth rate, if you assume that your estimation, your assumption is correct, then based on the market value, you will believe that the Coca-Cola is overpriced, right? However, if the market is correct, then it simply assumes that Coca-Cola, its long-term growth rate, will be higher than the GDP growth rate. So this question tells us the impact of the growth rate in valuation. By looking at the growth rate, we can do a sensitivity analysis. As you can see, the first row here, 0% to 6%, that is the long-term growth rate. By using the different long-term growth rate, we can arrive at the value per share, right? Coca-Cola price per share. As you can see, currently 4% using it. We have the intrinsic price per share 42.23. If using 6%, now the price per share will be 70.99. Now you can see valuation is very sensitive to the long-term growth rate. Just 2% change. Look at it. It increased from 42 to 70. Now I want to ask you a question. Based on the market price of Coca-Cola, what is the growth rate the market is anticipating? What is the growth rate the market is thinking about of Coca-Cola?
Between 5% to 6%.
Good. Between 5 to 6, right? Between 5 to 6. Because currently, the market price is 62. So that means the market is estimating a growth rate around 5.5 or 5.6 or something. Okay? So it's also called reverse engineering. If you just have the market price, and then if you believe the market price is correct, then you can reverse engineer, calculate back to get the growth rate. So now, as you can see, different growth rate assumptions, you will arrive at different valuation of a company. So what methods do we have to estimate the growth rate? We can have several different methods, right? The easiest method is what? Looking at the past history. Coca-Cola, what about its previous several years of free cash flow? We can get the growth rate by looking at the past, possibly, but we can look at it later that in this case, it's not such a good idea. The second way is to just simply give a very conservative estimate, like GDP growth rate. It's very conservative because strong companies or growing companies, they typically have a long-term growth rate higher than the GDP. A more reasonable estimate is to use the mean or the medium of the industry, the mean or medium of the industry. For example, here we can look at the mean and medium of the beverage sector. However, if you believe that Coca-Cola is like a good company in the industry, then subjectively you may increase the growth rate a little bit higher than the mean or median. Okay, that is a way. Another way is to look at the main competitor. It's just like what? Like the multiple approach, right? Finding the similar, very similar form, and get some idea from the growth rate from that company. That may be also a good base. But anyway, in the end, you need to make the assumption yourself. Okay, it's just the same for your valuation report later. You need to write. You need to make assumptions regarding the long-term growth rate. There's not always like the 100% correct method, right? You just want to give a most reasonable estimate. Now, let's continue to look at it. Here, I show you the free cash flow from 2004 to 2007. That is before our forecast period. Remember, we talk about this. One way of estimating the growth is to look at the past history. But let's look at this case, Coca-Cola. Look at its free cash flow. From 5,300 to 190 in 2007. Why? Well, in fact, Coca-Cola was performing very well at that period. It have decreasing free cash flow. It's simply what? Simply the capital expenditure increases year by year. At those days, Coca-Cola had so many good opportunities that they can choose to invest. So that's why you can see cash flow from operations increase. At the same time, it's also the cash investment. They have good opportunities, so that's why they continue to invest. As a result, the free cash flow in this case, it is not a good indicator of the financial performance of Coca-Cola. And this is one of the limitations of free cash flow. As you can see, free cash flow equals to cash flow from operations minus capital expenditure. So capital expenditure is treated as bad instead of good. But we all know that if a firm wants to grow, it needs capital expenditure on good projects. So that is a limitation, a disadvantage of free cash flow. Okay? It's related to capital expenditure. As you can see, free cash flow is looking at the past. It's not a good method for estimating the growth rate. We cannot use this method for estimating the growth rate. Some students may ask, okay, so you mentioned that free cash flow, the free cash flow is not a good indicator of financial performance. But if we really want to use free cash flow valuation model, what should we do? What should we do? Well, a possible solution is to extend the forecast horizon. I mean, we make it very easy, right? Just 3 years. But in the industry, normally it's 5 to 10. Normally it's 5 to 10. For growing companies, it can go as long as to 15 or 20. So increasing the forecast horizon can, in some extent, solve this issue. Because although maybe current few years the free cash flow is negative, but later it will be positive. Like for example, this year, next year, I invest huge amount of money on the project. But after 6 or 7 years, finally, it will have the cash inflow, right? So extending the forecast horizon is a reasonable approach. But this also brings drawbacks, because once we increase the forecast horizon, the assumptions may be less correct, because there may be more assumptions into the model. So that is a limitation of the free cash flow. It's just the same as the question 1-2, right? Question 1-2. Let's look at the question 1. It's a qualitative question. Question 1-2 is also about free cash flow. A solution of using free cash flow is to have a very long forecast horizon, but it requires too much speculation about the long term, like 20 years. What happened in 20 years, right? No one knows. Maybe the company already go bankruptcy. No, who knows? So this is the limitation of free cash flow. This question 1b is just another example of showing you that why sometimes free cash flow model is not a model that's quite useful. So here, question 1b, we use an example of Starbucks. Just the same, Starbucks in 1996 went into a huge successful expansion. Expansion means what? Open new stores, new store. Lot of capital expenditure. So that's why free cash flow again, all negative. Is it doing so bad? No, it's doing very good. It's simply that there are so many projects, they even borrow money to invest. Okay? That's another example. Remember last week in the lecture we talked about Walmart, just the same, similar situation. Okay, that is the limitation of free cash flow. Let's go to question 1a then. Question 1a, we talk about the dividend valuation model. Investor receive dividends as payoffs for investing in equity shares. Thus, the value of shares should be calculated by discounting expected dividend. True or false? True. Yeah, it's correct. Dividends are the payoff to equity investor. Sorry, got sore throat. So the second sentence is also true in theory, right? Equity value is the present value of the infinite stream of expected dividend that going concern generates. However, in practice, one can't forecast to infinity. So, in some cases, we cannot use dividend valuation model for the growing companies, especially like Apple, Cisco, Amazon. But these companies, in the first few years, they didn't pay any dividends. So how can we use a dividend valuation model? We cannot, right? So value is based on expected dividend, but forecasting dividend is not relevant to the value of a practical matter. Because whether to pay, how much to pay, it's just a policy. Some managers even borrow money to pay the dividends. So that is a dividend valuation model. In fact, dividend is just a value distribution. Pay to shareholder. It's not a value creation, So those are the valuation models for dividend valuation model and free cash flow valuation model. And we will see in the next week tutorial, residual earnings models, why residual earnings model is better. Okay? So that is today's tutorial. Remember to bring the laptop and pad next week. Okay? See you guys.